Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for Simply Felicity Live. I hope that you got an opportunity to see my first time out with this guest. I thought it was electric and asked her immediately to come back again. Um, so, excuse me for my phone playing in the background there.
Oh,
But
no
thank you so much for
worries.
joining us again. We have with us Leah Love. Thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. So I saw one of your Instagram posts I was digging into about the politics of homemaking. And I thought that
Mm.
would be a fun one to start with today. What was your impetus for that post?
To be honest, I was actually thinking about a lot of the African American women that I come into contact with, whether it be on social media, in personal life, and or in coaching or in Facebook groups. And because there's a prevalence, because of this idea that the Black identity is one big homogenous group, that we tend to orient ourselves towards the struggle, so to speak, and towards that is what Blackness is. And in keeping with that struggle and with this homogenous group identity, we tend to have these ideas that marriage, for one, is only for white people.
Wow.
More of our young children are thinking that in addition to that, with the heavy influence of radical feminism in a lot of Black households, that the additional idea is not only is marriage, something of the past, but should one get married, a woman would need to continue working. In other words, that there isn't that choice. So while feminism is very key to talk about women's choice and women being liberated to choose a variety of different careers, that we can have it all. We can be mom plus career woman plus community organizer plus everything else that we do, that for some reason that option of being a homemaker is not a valid option. And one of the things that is an issue is that because of the identity with the Black struggle, there's always this idea that one cannot simply survive on one income. And particularly so that one can't survive on the income. Since generally Black women tend to marry within the Black community, that certainly Black men cannot afford to take care of their home, when there's quite a bit of evidence to the contrary. And so I am transitioning my thought process to, since Black women are very keen in being politically oriented in terms of having various aspects of their lives be politicized, whether it be our hair, whether it be our complexion, whether it be our identity as mothers, as women, that, why not also consider the fact that being a homemaker is in fact a political statement? Because when we talk about the ills that confront the quote unquote Black community, or which I like to call it collective at this point, we often talk about, mothers' fears for their sons out in the world, mothers' fears for their daughters out in this world, and the various issues that a lot of parents confront in terms of public schools. And so I'm really keen on saying one of the first most fundamental political statements that you can make is by orienting yourselves back towards the home. And I say this with a caveat that I also started this as a single divorced mom at the
Right.
time, because there's a lot of us single moms out there. So one of the things I did in order to make my first stance was that I was still committed to staying at home. So I then investigated at home work, so that I could do customer service type positions online or by phone. And so I was still able to make that happen. And we have many, many women who are now finding that as a viable option, to where they can still work from home or have their own businesses or multiple businesses, real estate agent. They're doing a variety of things so that they can still be at home much more with their children and focus on what's really important right now, which is ensuring that our children understand our family family values, the things that are important to us, and perhaps, stem the tide of some of the ills that happen when children are really left to their own devices because both parents are working or the only parent is working and just doesn't really have time. So, yes, homemaking is a political statement as far as I'm concerned.
I absolutely love that because I think that it really sets people up for what they're going to face in doing it. I mean,
Yes.
I know in my experience, I mean, you're going as much as you could expect any type of opposition by taking a firm political stand, you
Hmm.
are going to face that opposition by deciding to be a homemaker for
Absolutely.
sure. Um, Definitely, like you said, from the Black collective, this sort of idea that we're all supposed to think the same or do things the same way, um, and as well for me personally, raising my children in areas where they were a bit of pioneers, meaning
Okay.
being the only Black people. Um, you
Right.
know, there was also some, and I've heard it from other Black women. I love the fact that people are just talking more in general about their experiences. It really
Hmm.
helps us not to feel so alone. I felt quite alone in the fact of not feeling real accepted by other PTA moms and things like that. Just, I'm sure they felt maybe they didn't know how to connect with me, right? But at the time, dealing with insecurities that I was dealing with, I also like didn't, know how to connect with them. It felt like they were already connected. And I was kind of waiting to be welcomed in, but I'm sure we were all sort of dealing with our own little fears with that or whatever, and it was really kind of hard. It honestly, until I got to the point of just legit not caring what anybody thought about me about anything, is when things began to move forward for me. And I actually ended up as president of the PTA for a year or two.
Mm.
And Now this was definitely a situation where I remember a long time ago, my pastor at the time, he said, you don't really have to move forward too much in life. You can just watch everyone move back. If you hold the
Ah,
line, there you'll be. There you are.
yes.
And so that's kind of what happened. Like nobody else really wanted to do it.
Right.
And they certainly weren't there was no racism or anything like that. Like, we really don't want her to do it, so we push someone forward. They didn't mind me doing it. I did the other things I did well, so they were like, "Yeah, sure, great," you know.
Absolutely.
Um, so anyway, I just think there are a number of things that you face when you make that decision that you don't go in thinking about. I went in thinking about being with my children. I
Hmm.
went in thinking about that I am going to be, you know, a major voice, a major influence, on these children. And but I really think thinking of it as a political statement would be helpful to understand what really lies ahead of you.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd be curious to hear some of the outcomes that you were not expecting? Because you mentioned that there were some things that you might not have been prepared for at the outset that you kind of faced as you went through it. For you personally, what were some of the things that if you'd known ahead of time, as you knew after the fact, that you might have said, you know what, let me do it this way or go this route?
Um, well, the things that I have learned that I, would tell my younger self would really be about confidence and
Mm,
would really be about believing in my design. Honestly, that who I am is enough for this situation. Um, as I just recently will celebrate 2 years of being in this home in October. So as I just recently kind of moved even from being at my parents' place for 3 years, um,
hmm.
I'm really not being able to figure things out financially for myself. I got here and I faced those old demons of not really paying bills on time, things not, really coming in right. I really struggled ever since their dad stopped paying child support consistently. And
Gotcha.
so, but when I, really got it in me, quite honestly, like how I put it is instead of it being God out there,
Mhm.
was God in here.
Mm.
And when that thing got into my heart, I was like, "Wait, I have the power." Like
Yes.
legit. Like I'm not waiting for the power. I'm not, you know what I'm saying? It's reality right now. I was given this situation and I'm put here because I have the power to make this happen. And that belief is like legit what made things happen. It's what made me recognize open doors and things like that, and kept me from cowering from other opportunities or thinking that my ideas weren't good enough or whatever. Like if it was my idea, it's worth it. It's worth trying, right? And we're just gonna go with
Absolutely.
it. And I realized I was never going to really know my power for me until I stopped listening to other people. Because quite frankly, I was getting advice that I wasn't really figuring out how to implement because
Mhm.
that wasn't supposed to be my path. But then when I looked at the results of those people's lives not being the life I was trying to create, like I didn't even know really a stay-home mom. Like I didn't know anyone that was really trying to do what I was doing,
Right.
that was guiding me by the hand or anything like that. So I was like, I am gonna have to listen to myself at some point and like
Yes.
and see if my ideas work or not, at least give myself a chance. And so that really, that beginning of that journey really brought a lot of confidence. And, that would have been wonderful to have at the time. But
Mm.
I thank God that at least He kept my mind to the place of being able to focus on those kids enough, because what the outcome I got from my children is why I did it in the first place. And that
That's right.
is to be able to guard them, because quite frankly, the income is not the scary part in this whole deal. The scary part is, even if you're two working parents, if that one parent cannot be incredibly focused on those kids, you've got to have one parent incredibly focused, because the onslaught from the schools, or from, from media and from imagery
Yes.
and stuff like that, I mean, that is what you need to be on the wall about. You know what I mean?
That's
It's
right.
better to live in a way smaller place. Look, if you're in a smaller place, you can keep your eye on them better. I mean, you might see
Exactly.
what they're looking at on
Exactly.
YouTube. I mean, you you got to be there, man. And I am so glad, even for the struggles that I went through, I'm so glad I made that choice. And I think when I read your post, I thought there is no greater reward than children with heads on straight.
Mhm.
Like
Absolutely.
that right there, that is worth the whole deal. I don't care what anyone has said about me, how anyone has made me feel some kind of way,
Mhm.
but to be able to see the fruit coming out
That's right.
now.
That's right. Because you have to realize, I think sometimes I posted earlier today about it, with what's going on in the world, particularly in 2020, a lot of parents are feeling as if they've just been hit by a bus. In other words, because they were going along with life on autopilot, because they were just pretty much busy with keeping up with the schedule, allowing their time and schedule to run their lives, as opposed to them taking the lead and ownership of their lives. They found that they didn't really know who their children were until their children became um, very vocalized because of what's happening, as well as being with them more during the whole pandemic thing. But then now we've got the Floyd incident, and it's really been a huge bewildering wake up call, I think, for a lot of parents who thought that they had instilled values. They thought that they had, shared with their children what was important to them, just in terms of their family's trajectory. And then they've come to realize that their kids are socialists or their kids are communists. And they've got all of these ideologies that you just never really had time to flesh out with them because you were just going along just to keeping your head above water. And now you've got this big mess on your hands, for lack of a better word. And so for me, that when you said, pioneer in terms of your children and being in the area where you were living, as well as you're talking about the idea of having to take personal accountability for yourself, having to really stand on your own personal ground when you made that decision to become a homemaker. I mean, these are part and parcel of what I call making that a political movement, in the sense that you are determining exactly how you want to lead your life, and you are allowing your ideology to not only just be something that you mention in the wind, but it's something that you literally live by and stand on. And one of the things that, as you mentioned with your children, that it's just a beautiful thing to be able to see them and the outcomes and the fruit of what you have planted, is the fact that we have to talk with them more. We have to be more present with them. And I think sometimes it's difficult for parents to really get into a space of vulnerability with their children. It's kind of like the difficulty of having that conversation about sex for the first time with your kids. But being able to be vulnerable and explaining to them why you feel the way you do, why you would like for them to tune some of the things out, because that machine works 24/7. The
Yes, it
media,
does.
the miseducation machine, we've been sleeping, to be quite honest, most of us parents, because we just don't take into account how it's really affecting our children. They've got the phone on their, one hand, a tablet on the other, computer. They are being hit 24/7 with an alternate reality. And if we think that that is not having a real influence on them, we're highly mistaken. And so taking that choice to be a homemaker, and not just doing it and assuming that the children are going to understand the full scope of why you're doing it just by osmosis, but talking with them and saying, I am home because I value you, that much. I value your upbringing, your mind space, your emotional landscape. It is so important to me that I have decided to make this huge step, because you're worth it. And having you break down those walls with your children and really explain to them, I'm concerned. I am literally very concerned about the things that you are might be taking part in, that you might be having exposure to. And it's very difficult as a young person to see 5, 10 years down the road. But I've been there and done that, and I've seen sometimes where some of my erroneous ideologies took me in my 20s. And there's some things that you just can't come back from. And particularly now, when we look at the protests that are out there, we've had children being shot and killed. And so
It is no
I,
game. It is no
it's
game.
done.
Like philosophy is out of the books. It is out
Yes.
of the statues. It is in your face. You know what
And
I
I
mean?
mean, 100%,
It, that thing is
100%. And if
that
you
is
don't,
wild. And so, actually, for all of those watching, we thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll share this. And what I hope you'll do, if you have an Instagram account, is to hop over to Instagram, because we're going to continue our live discussions there. I'm Felicity17 if you haven't followed me on Instagram. Also, I'll be tagging Leah Love online. So we'd love for you to continue the discussion over there. Thank you, Leah, for joining me on Facebook. And
absolutely.
let's figure out this Instagram thing that you've already got rocking. But
All right.
thank you guys so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.